Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I'm 16 and work at a state park. I have autism, which makes new situations pretty stressful for me, but my supervisor is super chill and patient. My coworker and I were having a pretty normal day. We just finished jump-starting another employee's truck because all our work vehicles are ancient. Our supervisor is only 25, but these trucks are way older than him. We were driving back to the shop in our Polaris Ranger, which doesn't have a windshield, when everything went sideways. This woman literally ran out into the street right in front of us. My coworker had to slam on the brakes so hard that I almost flew out of the vehicle. I was holding the jump starter kit and nearly became a human projectile thanks to this crazy lady's actions. She flashed this fake smile and acted like nothing happened. The woman cheerfully greeted us and explained that she and her group were out on a play date and were ready to go home, but their battery was dead. She asked if we could help them. I was honestly annoyed. This woman had almost caused me to get seriously hurt, and now she wanted our help. I was about to say sure anyway, but my coworker cut me off. He told her that we needed special permission to do this kind of thing. So we called my supervisor to ask. He's really understanding about everything, and he explained the situation to us clearly. When we jump-start someone's car and their battery gets damaged in the process, the state park could be held legally responsible. We're not allowed to help people with their personal vehicles because of liability issues. I explained this to the women as nicely as I could. That's when the second woman popped out of their van like some kind of angry jack-in-the-box. She asked us in a really snarky and rude voice if we weren't going to help them. Her tone was so nasty. I explained the rules again, trying to stay polite, but both women started getting really entitled and demanding. The first woman suggested that we could jump-start their car and keep it a secret so no one would know. I apologized but told her that rules are rules, and if I jump-started their car, I would be breaking the law. One of their kids started whining in the background about wanting to go home. The first woman told her child she knew they wanted to go home, but then turned back to us and said no one would know. She pointed out that we had the jump-start equipment right there on the seat and demanded that we just grab it and hook it up. She was getting more aggressive by the second. I could feel my stress levels rising, which is never good with my autism. My coworker was getting angry too and spoke up. He told the woman to listen, explained that we couldn't help her, and said there were many other people who could give her a jump, but not us. That's when the first woman completely lost it and went full crazy mode. She started yelling about how dare we talk to an adult like that. She said she had 4 children with her and didn't want them to act like us stupid teenagers. She kept going on about how we didn't know any manners around adults. My coworker and I looked at each other and nodded. We'd had enough. We started walking back to our vehicle to leave. The second woman yelled at us, demanding to know how we dared to walk away from them and ordering us to get back there. My coworker started up the Ranger and put it in drive. We began moving forward when the second woman ran right in front of our vehicle. She screamed at us to stop and demanded to know where we were going. I told her we were getting back to work. My coworker started reversing, trying to get around her, but she ran behind us and blocked us again. She told us we weren't going anywhere. I was getting really upset at this point and yelled at her to move before we got our superintendent involved. My coworker put the Ranger into 4-wheel drive and started turning toward the grass so we could drive around them on a dirt road that led back to our shop. That's when I heard a thunk sound. I turned around and saw the second woman trying to grab our jump starter kit from the back of the vehicle. I immediately reached back, yanked it away from her, and held onto it tightly. She screamed at me to stop touching her. My coworker slammed on the gas, and we jumped the curb and tore through the grass to get to the road. We sped down the dirt road and did this amazing drift around a curve. Both of us started laughing from relief and adrenaline. We got back to the shop and told our supervisor everything that happened. He said he'd let our security truck know so they could go talk to the women and sort things out. I stepped outside to put on some bug spray, thinking the worst was behind us. Then everything got a million times worse. Two police cars pulled up to our shop. Four officers got out of the cruisers and walked over to us. One of them told us they had received a call reporting that two workers had threatened these two women and their children and possibly tried to sexually assault one of the individuals. I told the officer that this was unbelievable. Sexual assault? We hadn't even touched anyone except when I pulled our equipment back from the woman who was trying to steal it. The officer had me sit in his cruiser while I told my side of the story. I was beyond upset and trying really hard to keep myself together. When I get really stressed because of my autism, I have mental breakdowns. I explained everything while sobbing my eyes out because I was so overwhelmed and scared. I got out of the cruiser and sat on the hood like the officer told me to. My co-worker was still being questioned in the other police car. Both women got out of a third car that had arrived, and I watched one of the officers talk to the second woman. She was pointing at me and then at her hip area. The officer nodded and started walking toward me. I'd seen enough police shows to know this looked bad. I got on my knees, put my hands behind my head, and just collapsed face first on the cement, crying and expecting the worst. The officer told me to come on and get up. Through my tears, I asked him if he didn't have to search me first. The officer started laughing and told me no. He explained that they were going to go look at the security cameras from the pool entrance since it pointed down to where we had been. I thought I was going to be charged with assault since the woman claimed I'd hurt her when she hit her hip against the back of our vehicle bed. We all went to the main office, and my co-worker and I sat in front of the security monitors with both women right next to us. We watched the footage together. You could see the whole argument, and then clear as day, the second woman sneaking up to the back of our vehicle and grabbing our jump starter kit. The video showed me grabbing it back from her and her hitting the bed of the vehicle herself when she lost her balance. The officer said that it looked like we two were right, and then told the second woman that she was under arrest for attempted theft. She started yelling about how this wasn't fair and that we selfish individuals should be the ones in trouble. The officer yelled at her as loudly as possible to shut up. She finally stopped talking. The first woman started dialing her husband's phone, but he didn't answer. The whole thing was insane. These women had called the police and made false accusations against two teenagers just because we couldn't break the law to help them with their car trouble. They wasted police resources, put us through emotional trauma, and tried to get us arrested over something completely ridiculous. After my divorce, I was working as an employee at this small travel agency in British Columbia. The owner was getting ready to retire and offered to sell me the business. As a single mom with two hockey-obsessed boys, I figured it would give me the flexibility I needed while building something for our future. The agency was small, just the owner and 3 employees including myself. We worked regular hours, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. It seemed straightforward enough, except for one major problem that came with the purchase: Karen. Karen was this woman in her early 60s who had been working there for years. From day one, I could tell she was going to be trouble. She had this entitled attitude where she thought the rules didn't apply to her. The previous owner had warned me about her sketchy behavior, especially how she was always trying to scam extra time off beyond her official vacation days. Her favorite trick was claiming she needed to come in on weekends or after hours to catch up on work that nobody had asked her to do. Then she'd demand overtime pay for these made-up sessions. The previous owner had caught her in multiple lies about this, but was terrified to fire her. Karen had been fired from another local travel agency for pulling the exact same stunts, then sued them for wrongful dismissal and won a settlement. So my predecessor just dealt with her nonsense rather than risk a lawsuit. When I took over, I thought I could handle her better. I instituted clear guidelines about time off and established a strict no overtime policy. Karen still tried her usual tricks, but I was much less willing to put up with her garbage than the previous owner had been. But Karen had one ace up her sleeve that she loved to play. Since I was a single mom, I sometimes had to leave an hour or two early to get my boys to hockey practice or games. Karen figured out my schedule and would wait until I was out of the office to book herself days off without permission. I'd show up the next morning only to discover she wasn't coming in because she decided to take a spontaneous vacation day. Most of the time, I let it slide. With my no overtime policy, she couldn't claim weekend work to make up the hours anymore. She either lost a day's pay or had to use her actual vacation days. Plus, the other employee and I could handle things fine without her. Honestly, having her gone was sometimes easier than dealing with her attitude. But then came the incident that finally gave me the opening I needed. I had to take a couple days off to take my boys to a hockey tournament. I told both Karen and my other employee, both verbally and in writing, that they absolutely could not book time off during those dates because I'd be away and needed them both in the office. The weekend before my trip, I went in on Saturday to catch up on paperwork and check our weekly sales figures. That's when I discovered something interesting. Karen had booked a trip to Las Vegas for her daughter and son-in-law, plus a plane ticket for herself to Calgary where her daughter lived. The dates matched exactly when I'd be out of the office and had explicitly told her she couldn't take time off. I checked our vacation schedule and sure enough, she'd booked those exact days off despite being told they were unavailable. I didn't let on that I knew about her travel plans. Instead, I sent her a professional email explaining that I had to deny her request for those days off since she'd already been told they were unavailable due to my absence. Her response was a masterpiece of lying. She claimed her daughter needed some urgent medical treatment or surgery in Calgary, and she had to go help out and watch her granddaughter for a few days. She made it sound like a family emergency that couldn't be avoided. That's when I played my hand. I wrote back telling her that I knew about the Las Vegas trip she'd booked for her daughter and son-in-law. I pointed out that her Calgary trip was obviously to babysit while they were in Vegas, not for any medical emergency. I made it clear that the days off were still denied, especially since she'd booked them after being explicitly told they weren't available. Karen's next email was pure gold. Instead of addressing the fact that she'd been caught red-handed in a lie, she went full victim mode. She wrote about how she'd been such a dedicated employee for years and couldn't understand why she was being treated so unfairly after everything she'd done for the business. Then came the threat. She wrote that since she wasn't being valued as an employee, she had no choice but to retire and was giving her 2 weeks' notice. I simply replied that I still couldn't grant her the days off and left it at that. I didn't acknowledge her retirement threat at all. Then I called my accountant, who also acted as my business advisor. He'd heard plenty about Karen's antics over the years. When I explained what had happened, he got excited and told me this was exactly what I'd been waiting for. He explained that she had just handed me her resignation in writing. He said I could accept that resignation, let her work out her 2 weeks, or pay her 2 weeks in lieu with no severance required since I wasn't firing her. The following Monday, I arrived early with my longtime boyfriend as a witness. I packed up Karen's personal belongings from her desk and separated out anything that belonged to the business. This included a small box of index cards where she kept client information like phone numbers, addresses, and credit card details. Karen was old school and had resisted putting client information into our computer database, so she kept everything on these cards. My other employee arrived and we all waited for Karen to show up. She walked in just before 9 o'clock, greeting everyone with a cheerful good morning like nothing had happened. But I could see her pause when she noticed my boyfriend sitting in the corner of the office. Karen was halfway to her desk when I stopped her and told her there was no need to go any further. I told her that I had accepted her notification of retirement. Then I handed her a check for the hours she'd worked in the current pay period plus 2 weeks' wages instead of having her work out her notice. Karen looked completely stunned and started panicking. She kept insisting that she hadn't retired and wasn't ready to retire. I explained that she had indeed retired and given her notice, and I had it all in writing as proof. She kept repeating that she hadn't retired and wasn't ready to retire while looking desperately at my other employee for support. But the other employee just stayed quiet and refused to get involved. I pointed to the box with her belongings, wished her a happy retirement, and told her to leave the office. Karen quickly went through the box and noticed the index cards with client information weren't there. She demanded that I return the cards to her, but I refused. I explained that they were property of the business, contained personal client information, and that I'd be violating Canadian privacy laws if I let her take them. Karen's shock turned into stubbornness and she refused to leave without the box of cards. Both my other employee and my boyfriend started telling her repeatedly to just leave. I warned Karen that if she didn't leave, we'd have to call the police. My boyfriend immediately dialed 911 and told the dispatcher about a disgruntled former employee at our travel agency who was refusing to leave the premises. Within minutes, 2 police officers arrived. Karen immediately ran to the door ranting about being fired and about the missing box of client information. One officer took Karen outside to hear her side of the story, while the other stayed inside to hear mine. The officer inside agreed that Karen wasn't legally entitled to the box of client information. The officer who had talked to Karen came back inside and said she was insisting that I was holding on to her personal belongings, specifically a box of important information. Both I and the first officer explained what was actually in the box to the second officer, who also agreed it wasn't Karen's property. The officers then picked up the box of Karen's actual personal belongings, took it outside to her, and told her she needed to go home. But I wasn't done with my revenge yet. The next day, I put up a large sign in the window of the business congratulating Karen on her retirement. I even placed a small announcement in the local newspaper doing the same thing. The final piece of my revenge came when I filled out the government forms for when an employee leaves. I made sure to check the box labeled retired as the reason Karen was no longer employed. By marking it as retirement instead of quitting or being fired, Karen became ineligible to collect unemployment insurance benefits. Her own words had trapped her, and now she was stuck with the results of calling it retirement when she was just trying to manipulate me. My girlfriend and I had been together for about 2 years when we decided to take the next big step, getting a dog together. We've been living in separate apartments, but spending most nights together anyway, so it felt like the right time to commit to something bigger than just ourselves. I'd never owned a dog before. My parents were strictly cat people, and I'd been too busy with work and travel to consider getting a pet as an adult. My girlfriend, on the other hand, had grown up surrounded by dogs. Her family always had at least 2 at any given time, and she'd been the one to convince me that we were ready for this responsibility. We found him at a local rescue shelter, a mixed breed puppy, maybe 6 months old with the biggest brown eyes I'd ever seen. The shelter staff said he'd been surrendered by a family who couldn't handle his energy level. When my girlfriend saw him, I knew we weren't leaving without him. We agreed on everything up front. We'd split all costs, 50-50, food, toys, vet bills, everything. It seemed fair since we were both working full-time and would be sharing the responsibilities. We even opened a joint account specifically for dog expenses to keep things organized. The first few months went smoothly. We got him his initial vaccines, had him neutered, bought all the supplies he needed. Every bill got split right down the middle, just like we'd planned. The only thing we were waiting on was pet insurance, which we couldn't get until he completed his full vaccination schedule. Yesterday started like any other day. I got home from work around 6, tired but looking forward to seeing both of them. Our dog came bounding to the door like he always did, tail wagging so hard his whole body wiggled. My girlfriend greeted me excitedly, saying she had something to show me. She told me she'd found our dog's new favorite treat and seemed really proud of her discovery. I asked her what it was, curious about what had gotten her so excited. She told me it was grapes and explained how she'd given him 3 earlier in the day. She described how he'd gone crazy for them and seemed to love the taste. The words hit me like a truck. I felt my stomach drop and my face go pale. I asked her to repeat what she'd just said, hoping I'd heard wrong. She said grapes again, then noticed my expression and asked why I was looking at her strangely. I told her that grapes were toxic to dogs and that we needed to get him to the emergency vet immediately. She responded saying that couldn't be right since she'd had dogs her whole life. I insisted I was serious and explained that grapes could cause kidney failure in dogs. I told her we needed to leave right now. I was already grabbing my keys and the dog's leash while she stood there looking confused and then panicked when reality started to set in. The emergency vet clinic was a 30-minute drive that felt like hours. Our dog seemed fine, happy even, completely unaware that he might be in serious danger. The vet took him back immediately once we explained what happened. The vet asked us how many grapes our dog had eaten and when exactly it happened. My girlfriend answered that he'd had 3 grapes about 4 hours earlier. The vet explained that they needed to start treatment right away. She described the process, inducing vomiting, giving activated charcoal, starting IV fluids, and monitoring kidney function with blood work. The whole process took 6 hours. 6 hours of sitting in that sterile waiting room, watching other pet emergencies come and go, wondering if our dog was going to be okay. The vet assured us that because we caught it early and opted for the full treatment protocol, his chances were excellent. When they finally brought the bill, I nearly choked. £1,200 for 3 grapes. The vet delivered the good news that our dog's blood work looked normal and they'd caught the problem in time. She explained that we'd need to bring him back in 3 days for follow-up blood work, but she expected him to make a full recovery. Relief flooded through me, immediately followed by anger when I looked at that massive bill again. During the drive home, my girlfriend was quiet. I could tell she felt terrible, but I was struggling with my own emotions. I told her that I thought she should pay the entire bill for this incident. She asked me what I meant, reminding me that we'd agreed to split everything 50-50. I explained that our agreement was for normal dog expenses, but this happened because she'd fed him something toxic. She insisted it was just an honest mistake and that she hadn't known grapes were dangerous. I asked her how she could not know something so basic when she'd supposedly had dogs her whole life. She said she'd simply forgotten and got defensive, pointing out that she hadn't done it on purpose. I told her that forgetting something like grape toxicity wasn't acceptable for someone who claimed to be experienced with dogs. The argument continued for the next 2 days. She kept insisting that since we were partners in dog ownership, we should stick to our 50-50 agreement regardless of who caused the problem. She said that's what partnerships were about, sharing both the good and bad outcomes. I argued back that there was a difference between splitting costs for unavoidable health issues and paying for someone else's careless mistake. I pointed out that any dog owner should know basic toxic foods, and if they didn't, they should look it up before giving anything new to their pet. She tried to make me feel guilty by saying I was being unfair and that accidents happen. She reminded me of all the times she'd taken care of the dog when I was working late or traveling for business. I told her that a simple 5-second internet search would have prevented this whole expensive disaster. On the 3rd day, she finally admitted that maybe she should have been more careful, but instead of offering to pay the full amount, she suggested we split the cost 60-40, with her paying the larger portion. I rejected her compromise immediately. I told her that 60-40 wasn't enough when she was 100% responsible for what happened. That's when she completely lost it. She started yelling about how I was being unreasonable and controlling with money. She accused me of using this incident to punish her and said I obviously didn't trust her judgment with our dog. I stayed calm and reminded her that this wasn't about trust or punishment. It was about responsibility. I explained that if we didn't establish clear boundaries about who pays for preventable accidents, what would happen next time she made another honest mistake. She got even angrier and threatened to rehome the dog if I didn't drop the issue. She said she couldn't be in a relationship where she was constantly walking on eggshells, afraid that any mistake would cost her hundreds of pounds. That threat was the final straw for me. I told her that anyone who would abandon a dog over a money dispute had no business owning pets in the first place. The next morning, I transferred the full £1,200 from our joint dog account to pay the vet bill myself. Then I took our dog and most of his supplies and moved back to my own apartment. 2 days later, she called crying and apologizing. She said she'd been talking to her mother, who'd been horrified to learn about the grape incident. Apparently, her family had always known about grape toxicity, and her mother couldn't believe she'd forgotten something so important. She offered to pay me back the full amount and begged me to come back home. She promised to be more careful and to always research before giving the dog anything new. I told her I'd accept the money, but our relationship was over. Someone who would threaten to abandon a pet during an argument wasn't someone I could trust to be a responsible partner, whether with animals or in life. She tried to argue that she'd only said that because she was upset and didn't mean it, but I'd already made up my mind. A week later, she transferred the £1,200 to my personal account. She also sent a long text message, apologizing again and asking if we could at least remain friends. I never replied. Our dog and I are doing great in our new apartment, and I've already got him fully insured. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.